if we can be the place that remains and increases our lead as the number one place to set up a fintech business, or indeed to grow or scale up a fintech business, that presents huge opportunities.
Welcome to Political Sandbox by Chamber, the place where politicians get to show us their ideas for how they'd like to transform the country. My name's Chris Wilford, I'm Director of Financial Services Policy at the CBI, and I lead a team that work with businesses of all sizes across the economy on the enabling role of financial services. So be that how people can access the finance they need to grow, or the role insurers, banks, asset managers play in helping people achieve their ambitions. And it's great to be joined today by Bim Afolami MP, a leading voice in Parliament on the role of financial services and the critical role it plays in our economy, from transition finance all the way through to innovation and fintech and the opportunities we have ahead post-Brexit. I'm really excited to be discussing with him today his ideas on how the sector can play its role in the whole levelling up agenda. Without further ado, Bim, great to be joined by you today, and obviously you've done a lot of work across Parliament on these issues. What are the major opportunities for UK financial services?
Well, there is definitely a big post-Brexit opportunity. I think that what people who aren't involved in the industry don't fully appreciate is that all the regulation, all the rules that govern the industry were previously set in Brussels. Now, the UK had a big say as part of that, because we have the largest financial services industry in the European Union at the time. But now we get to set those rules here at home. And I think that's a huge opportunity, because of course, even if you're doing well at negotiating in Europe, you're going to win some and lose some. And we now have the opportunity in these years ahead to frame the post-Brexit opportunity, to get it right, to be nimble and think much more globally in terms of our financial services offer. Because to be frank, our biggest competitors are not Frankfurt or Paris. They are Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, New York. They are our big competitors, and we've got to think in that global sense.
I think that's a really important point about the global nature of the challenges ahead. And if you could think of sort of one big play for UK financial services, what do you think it would be?
Well, I would say that really you've got a couple of different things. One thing that the financial services industry can really do is to be absolutely at the forefront of fintech regulation. Because fintech, and what I mean by fintech is simply innovation using technology in areas of financial services, whether that be day-to-day banking, whether it be payment services, whether it be all sorts of other things. That regulation is emerging, it's changing, it's a new field. If we can be the place that remains and increases our lead as the number one place to set up a fintech business, or indeed to grow or scale up a fintech business, that presents huge opportunities. And getting that regulation right is really important. And actually, we've been doing a lot of work on that. I've been doing a lot of work with the Treasury on that, and with the government in lots of different ways. So I think fintech is a really important emerging area. But secondly, I would also look at the emerging debates that are being had about tax and the willingness for international banks and big financial service industries, insurers, banks and others, to set up in the UK and to maintain big footprints in the UK. We need to make sure that it's as productive, as profitable, as easy and as positive for those companies to stay and grow in the UK. And I think that there are lots of things we can do. Taxes is a big part of it. And that's why I'm very keen on financial services and levelling up. Because when I say about the UK, and I've been very precise about that, I'm not talking about the City of London. I'm talking about the whole country. Because 2/3 of financial services jobs are outside the City of London. 2/3 of the profit generated is outside the City of London. So we need to make sure that it's not just we want people to come to London. We want international financial services sector businesses to come to the United Kingdom, different parts of the United Kingdom, so that the benefits of those industries isn't just some sort of macro GDP benefit and taxes to the Treasury, though that's important. It's those benefits go to the people who live in this country, because that's what we're in politics for.
I think that is such a hugely important point around the whole link between global competitiveness and what the sector can do to unleash growth across the economy. I think the two aren't mutually exclusive. I think people often think global competitiveness, tax and regulation in that box here, and sort of forget the role that that plays in helping that capital flow into the real economy, as it were. I'm just really keying up on that levelling up idea. You know, London, it's a great global centre, something to be proud of course, but what other centres do you think are really up and coming in the UK and have a big role to play?
Yeah, so here, and I know we've got to be very careful about politicians declaring interests, I used to work at HSBC, and I worked closely at that time, this is before I was elected into Parliament, and I worked closely on the project to establish the new retail bank in Birmingham, where HSBC. Ian Stewart, who's the CEO of that bank, I worked with when I was at the bank, and obviously I see and work with now. Birmingham is really emerging as a leading centre. Edinburgh has been a leading centre for a long time and will continue to be so. And indeed Bournemouth, again, is a growing centre. I think JP Morgan have a big footprint there, and they're increasing that. I was hearing only this morning about Bristol. There being lots of jobs being created in financial services in Bristol as well. And I probably left out all sorts of others, and I don't want them all to hate me, but I just picked those out. These are all places that have lots of advantages compared to, say, for example, being in London, whether it be cost or otherwise, access to talent from the great universities in the cities that I've just mentioned. They all have leading universities. That's another opportunity for businesses to go there, and they've got great links internationally as well through airports and the rest. So there are lots of sectors where it's hard to necessarily have lots of different clusters all over the country for various reasons, but financial services is not one of them. We can really do this.
And this is going a bit off piece, I guess, but
off piece.
Yeah,
it's fun.
You've worked in the sector, you've done all this work in Parliament. If you were having a conversation with sort of a local leader, sort of a mayor, metro mayor, or someone who's leading their local authority, and they're sort of like, actually, I'd really like financial services to come into my area, not just for the jobs it brings, but to help local businesses. What do you think would be a sort of good way for local leaders to attract these kind of businesses?
That's a really, really good question. So I think the things I would look at are planning and physical space. If you are, depending on the type of financial services business, take an insurer or part of a bank or something like that. You need a building, and you need a building that people can easily get to in the centre of town. You need you need the train station to be reasonably accessible, that sort of thing. It's important that planning is done as simply and as easily as possible. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but the local leaders are the people who probably have more influence on that than the Prime Minister or anyone else. So I'd say planning is one thing. Another thing is access to talent. What do I mean by that? And this goes into some of the work on levelling up that I want to do. Access to talent is not just universities, though universities is a key part of that. I went to university. University is a great way to prepare yourself for going to the financial services sector. But so are apprenticeships. Offer local help the financial services sector who wants to come to your town or city, help them with the apprenticeships offer that they can give to your young people. What does that look like? Working with the local colleges, FE colleges and others, working with local schools, indeed working with the local authority, and working with the local universities around degree apprenticeships, which you shouldn't forget about as well. So I think that if you can present planning that's done in a positive and straightforward way, and access to talent, those are two ways of starting off that I think make your area a positive place to grow and develop a financial services business.
I think that's so important, particularly I think it's often forgotten the importance of people in financial services, and they make it work. Financial services is ultimately a people business, choosing who you want to invest in, choosing where you want to work, and creating those attractive places where people want to be, I think is a huge part of that whole thing. So yeah, spot on, I think. And, you know, I think you rightly talked earlier about the framework in which financial services sits, so regulation, taxation, particularly attracting that sort of global audience and firms to the UK, but as well as helping, you know, our sector itself post-Brexit seize the various opportunities and go for that. Now, there's a huge amount of regulatory review going on in the UK at the moment, everything from capital requirements for banks all the way through to Solvency II, which is the prudential framework for insurers, and you touched on some of the fintech work there as well. Do you think this review is heading in the right direction?
Yes, it is, because it's about, first of all, it's liberalising and simplifying, making it simpler and easier to run a productive, successful, safe financial services business. That's good. But also, it's the detail and thoroughness with which the government's looked at it. And, you know, I've spoken to the Chancellor and the City Minister about this, just how in every single area, most of which, by the way, aren't winning, you know, almost all of this isn't about winning votes, this is about getting it right. You know, the highly technical details that really matter, that are not necessarily things that MPs will get through their inboxes, but they really, really matter. And the detail with which we're looking at this, I think, should mean that it's successful and productive. I think that the political job now is to somehow bring this all together to be able to tell a positive story for the sector, so that we say, look, we are making it easier for anybody to run and develop and grow a financial services business. But at the same time, the industry, and this is where the work that I want to do on Levelling Up comes in, we need you to play your part with the Levelling Up mission, which is how are you going to benefit the communities all across this country with the sort of freedoms and hopefully the improved productivity and success that you're having. And that story is what we need to land now.
Very much agree about that story, and particularly the social role for the sector it can play. And that forms part, I guess, of the whole environmental, social and governance agenda, or ESG, that's been huge, and a lot of focus in particular on sustainable finance. And we had COP26, and we saw the Glasgow sort of Alliance for Net Zero, or Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, I should say, and those huge global commitments in Glasgow. Just want to get your take on progress to date and what sort of opportunities lie ahead for sustainable finance here in the UK.
I mean, I will probably get in trouble for saying this. So before I say this thing I think I might get in trouble for, I do want to say that I am, and I'm on record, I've done a huge amount of work on the environment. It's something that I'm very passionate about, as an individual and from a policy perspective. Finance is key into achieving that, because ultimately, unless the financial system can support people and businesses and organizations make the changes they need to make in order for us to get to net zero, then nothing works, right? So I think it's really important. However, I do think that when we talk of the whole ESG agenda, it is very, very difficult to really get through to people. And I think the reason for it is because it's completely impenetrable. I mean, the sums that people talk about are just so massive. You know, when people say, oh, you know, we've got Mark Carney who does all this great work, but you know, when people say, oh, he's dealing with 100 billion this or 1 trillion that, it seems so big that if I was in Hitchin, as in my constituency, and I was speaking to somebody who runs a financial services business in Hitchin, doing very well, to somebody like him running a business employing 40 people, what do these big numbers mean? I think it's very, very hard. So that's why I think that on the ESG agenda, what we need to do is we need to localize it, we need to make it practical, we need to make it actionable. What does that mean? It means in your local area, what are you doing as a business in order to support sustainability? Everything down to the energy you choose to use, the building materials you choose to have, how you operate, how you work with your workers, and how you operate people going into the office, and whether you give people benefits to get bikes or electric cars. All of those things at a very practical level, these are the things you can do. But at a policy level or a more sort of financial level, what does this mean? I think it means the industry needs to very quickly develop a set of rules that are transparent, that are clear, that are obvious, that can be put on the front page of any newspaper and anybody can understand about what we're trying to get, where we're trying to go, what this means if you're a financial services institution, this ESG agenda. Because I mean, you'd have heard about greenwashing, that you know is a term that's very common, and a lot of people get cynical when they hear very, very big numbers. I think we need to look at that cynicism and say, right, we are going to set out exactly what the scorecard is, exactly what success looks like, and be able to match that up. And so anybody watching this, any business, any organization, large or small, will know the sort of practical things they can do to play their part. That's what we need to be doing more of. And I think that so far, the ESG agenda is so broad, so massive, that I think a lot of people, myself included, find it quite hard to get your arms around it as a subject.
I think getting those steps, those small steps people can take to get on the sort of ESG train, as it were, and sort of make it a reality is so important. It's certainly a massive part of my job at the moment, is sort of trying to help particularly small and medium-sized businesses see actually what do I need to do to get like green finance or something like that, and breaking it down, localizing it. I think it's a really important idea and something we all need to sort of get behind and work on in the years ahead. I want to talk about something a bit different now. We talked about the regulatory review for sort of in terms, I guess, of firms themselves. If we actually look at something like the listings review, which was undertaken by Lord Hill to sort of make us more attractive to tech startups ostensibly, but also opening it up to a wide range of businesses to make it easier to list and use public markets to grow. We've also got the Sir Peter Gershon review on how to create more unicorns. Are you excited by these pieces of work? Do you think those recommendations from Lord Hill and what will come from the unicorn review, do you think they're important steps?
They're obviously important steps, and look, I've engaged a lot with Lord Hill on his review. I haven't seen the work that Peter Gershon's doing on his, but I look forward to doing that. It matters because public markets matter. And the reason why the London Stock Exchange matters, or any public market matters, is the best companies, significant numbers of them today, compared to say 35, 40 years ago, are private businesses. That means the people that take the benefits from those companies doing well are hedge funds, private equity funds, or very, very wealthy individuals. Now, I don't think that's very healthy. I think that what is healthiest is if we have as many public companies as possible and as many leading British public companies as possible. So that means that anybody, any citizen, has the right and the ability to invest in them, or indeed people's pension funds also find it easy to invest in them. And I think that having a public, there's no secret, the London Stock Exchange, compared to lots of other jurisdictions, has been falling behind in recent years. And that's not my view, it's just borne out by the facts. As a percentage of listings of public, new listings, IPOs, London 10 years ago was in a place that was far advanced to where we are today. And that's for a bunch of different factors. It's less that we've done things terribly, it's more that other jurisdictions have really improved. But we've got to respond to that. There's no point us just saying our history's great, let's just rely on it. We've got to respond. How do we respond? It's all the work around the rules and things like Lord Hill is doing, things about fintech, the broader environment, the tax environment, what the Chancellor did around in the budget for trying to make sure that we do not become uncompetitive in the tax terms for banks, I think is also important. But also, underneath all of that, it's about making sure that we have a rules and atmosphere that is positive about financial services. This isn't just about dry letter law or regulations. It's about an atmosphere so that people in the public, the press, politicians all think this is a sector that we need to champion, this is a sector we need to get behind. Obviously, in the aftermath of the financial crisis, this was very difficult for very good reason, but that was a long time ago. We've got to move forward, recognise the huge benefits that the sector gives for people, for jobs, for growth in the economy. And that's why I think that right now is the time to really push on the levelling up agenda for financial services. What does that mean? I've talked about apprenticeships, regional jobs across the country, and developing more clusters for jobs in different parts of the country. But it also means engaging with debt advice charities, tackling bad practice where it exists. Because yes, sometimes people take out too much debt. We shouldn't be punishing those people. We should be helping them and say, how is it that we can help you get from your position you're in today to a better position in the future? And then I suppose the last bit of it is access to finance for groups of people that maybe have found it difficult to access finance before. Obviously, we talk about SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses access to finance a lot, but also female entrepreneurs statistically find it much harder to raise money. Ethnic minority entrepreneurs statistically find it much harder to raise money. So these are people who've done the right thing, set up a business, going out on their own, and yet when they go and try and raise equity, they can't do it. When they can't raise debt, there are problems, but actually I think there are fewer problems on the debt side. It's more equity just to get your business up and running. Let's tackle those problems as well. So that's, apprenticeships, regional jobs, access to finance, and underrepresented, I put it that way, underrepresented groups, making sure they get access to finance as well. Because the financial services sector has a choice. It either really engages and shows and demonstrates that it's engaging with all the people in this country across all regions of the country, or it thinks it doesn't have to bother, thinks that the old model's okay, and will gradually lose the permission, to be successful, permission to operate. And I don't want to see that happen. I'm not saying we're in that position at all. I don't think we are. But the answer is not to stay static, it's to move forward, and move forward in a positive way. So that's why I'm so passionate about the levelling up work the financial services industry can do right now.
And all key points to creating that growth culture, which in turn is going to help those businesses right across the whole country sort of go and sort of expand and hire more people and create new opportunities. Yeah, I very much agree with a lot of that. And just on that sort of side of things, we obviously got public markets, making those more accessible, but we touched on equity finance there, and it's been a historic problem in the UK in getting particularly small and medium-sized businesses to actively engage with equity and finance in contrast to debt finance to support their growth. Do you have any thoughts about, you've touched on it there in terms of knowledge and awareness and that sort of thing, any other ideas of how we can sort of get more businesses engaging with equity finance?
It's a very difficult one. It's been discussed for probably decades. I think that part of it is just cultural, and that is something that I think is a slow burn. It will take a long time, but that's no excuse for not trying. Another thing is there are little tweaks that we can make to rules. We should look again at how we do our accounting rules, how we do our tax rules, to think, are there things we can do to further incentivize people to take equity rather than debt? Because if we could do that, then you provide that incentive and people will work it out themselves. They don't need government to tell them. So I think that there are little things we can do, because ultimately, by making it easier for people to raise equity, we make it easier for people to be owners, not just use a business or work in it, but actually own part of that business. And going back to what I was saying about public markets, in a world where fewer businesses more broadly are public rather than private compared to where we were 30, 40 years ago, making it easier for private businesses to offer equity to their workers, for example, or to people who live in their town, or people who live in their region, I think is a positive thing socially as much as anything else, and benefits the company as well. So I think they're the sort of things we should be looking at.
That's a really interesting idea, because often, equity finance, I'm going to lose control, but actually other ways of using equity, that's a really interesting area. I think we should all be looking at that ahead. Bim, that's been really fascinating discussion. We've talked on everything from regulation through to how to create a growth culture. I think it's really exciting to see the role you think financial services can play in the levelling up agenda. Very much agree with a lot of that, and from our sort of side, very much look forward working with you to bring that to reality. Chamber is the community voice. You can join the conversation by following us on Twitter at Chamber Voice, on Instagram at Chamber UK. You can also visit our website at www.chamberuk.com or email us at info@chamberuk.com, and really look forward from the CBI angle working with you going ahead, and hope everyone stays safe.